I know that going back over a channel so soon can ruin future potential to revisit and learn about them as they change. It's very much like watching a Moffat food serial and seeing him spam the traits we liked so much about his episodes until it became boring. But in this case, one thing stands out so much from the rest of the crowd of videos that I had to address it. And the original video I did just doesn't have enough room for a sensible runtime. I mean, it was 50 minutes. This one's going to be a long one as well, so. And our flop box is back into the roof, my friend. When researching for my original video, I saw a number of videos referring to the occult, Freemasonry, and, for some bizarre reason, Disney's Frozen. Now, I grew up with some of the Disney classics like Mary Poppins, Pocahontas, Pinocchio, and The Lion King. So this made me wonder what this man was on about. Is he just hating children's TV or something like that? Honestly, don't know. I haven't watched Frozen personally, but I've seen enough clips to get a general idea of the plot, and even tried composing a song to the tune of Let It Go, all about how horses can be mischievous. However, the way Greg delves into it is somewhat ridiculous, and like so many other things he does, fails to understand the context. Let's take a look at how and why it is. Firstly, his original video has a heavy emphasis on the lyrics of the song Let It Go, about freedom, breaking free, and letting one's power go. He runs through the lyrics and points out all the anarchistic sentiments that the song seems to be endorsing. No denying that it's in there, and one can certainly look at the song in that manner. The thing is, though, it's more to do with the perspective of the listener. So many things in songs can be focused on one thing, whereas others can be more open to interpretation. For example, in this case, it can also mean letting go of toxic attitudes. The freedom of releasing one's bottled up emotions from abuse or neglect, or just letting go of rules that say one can't show one's fears, anger, or pain. Essentially, telling men not to bottle up their feelings, just let them out, let them go. Your friends are being toxic, let them go. Don't let them hold you. Don't let them hold you back. Go into the church. Do what you feel is right. All of these are actually healthy and can help one open themselves up to not only their friends, but Jesus, not just in confession, but allowing him to take up your burden as he bids us to do. But all that is the general sentiment of the song, and it's way out of context of what it actually is in the movie. Now, I'm not a man for the musicals. My ex-girlfriend tried getting me to join her at the musicals. I'm not into them. But I like Disney for its correct use of songs in the right moment, rather than just a random song just to over-detail one part of the plot, which may or may not have any significance at all. or just get a load of random people onto the stage to sing and dance. It's just getting more of a show rather than carrying the plot forwards. However, if we take even a great classic song that we all know and love, and take it out of context, it can lead to all manner of misconceptions. This isn't just from Let It Go. If we take, just say, the first three character-led songs of The Lion King, it gets rather ridiculous and takes us well away from what the actual plot is. For example, I Just Can't Wait to Be King. That's one of the great character-led songs. It's pretty good and a great one for the child actor to push forwards. It's about him being a spoiled brat and just wanting to rule like his dad, essentially bigging up his entitlement. Be Prepared is a song about the coming chaos that Scar would bring to the Pride Lands with all the hyenas. You could say it's a villain's version of Do You Hear the People Sing? And Hakuna Matata is about just letting go of things, moving on, shirking responsibility, and leaving everything behind you without a care. It's in your past, leave it there. Do any of those sum up the plot of The Lion King? Absolutely not. They carry the plot forwards, and the story itself is a redemption arc for Simba and him becoming king. Yes, he was an arrogant little twit when he was young, but Scar's villainous led him to kill Mufasa and send Simba on the run, only for him to meet up with Timon and Pumbaa and just burn out because he had no responsibilities, he was kicked out of his homeland, so he ran away. He had a free life, only to be called back by his people. No songs mention that. I don't think there need songs after that point in the show. It's all action from then on. And that was Simba coming back. That's the real plot. Songs are only part of the main story, not the story itself. So to understand how Let It Go fits in and why it is sung when it is sung, we have to study the context. So let's look over the general plot. There's no denying it, Elsa does have ice-based magic powers, but naturally magic is not trusted in the kingdom. And in fact, due to an accident when his sister Anna was small, she had to restrict her powers. People said that she had to hide it, she had to contain herself, otherwise she could cause more harm. Especially when you bear in mind that she was also the heir to her parents' kingdom, and so had to be all respectable. If anything like that came out, it could be all manner of nasty thing. It's a bit like, say, one of Hitler's staff suddenly coming out as a dedicated Christian. Shock horror, I know. However, this means she's hiding a true part of herself that others may find disturbing. Let It Go was sung after she was found out not only by her sister, but also the entire kingdom and their guests. She ran off into the mountains after nearly causing more harm that she clearly had no intention of doing, but all the same, she had to run off into the mountains. So she was feeling alone, she was feeling isolated, so she decided, you know what, I don't care. I'm going to let my power run free. I'm out here, no one's going to hurt me. I'm isolating myself, so let's break that isolation permanently. She's very much an isolated person, and that's just her expressing outwardly because of the coldness inside becoming outward. Thing is, due to this, she was unable to control her powers, and it caused more trouble in the village, putting her sister on a quest to find her. She was high in the mountains. The rest of the plot gets a little bit convoluted, there's plenty of spoilers, so all I'm going to say is, ultimately, it was resolved, and she was accepted for who she was in the kingdom. That can be incredibly important. Now, to me, this sounds more like a parallel to The Hunchback of Notre Dame, where people are afraid of something in the cathedral, Mother. But due to his actions, they learn to accept him for who he was, not what he looked like. That he was a far better person than the priest. Parallel here in general. Another Disney film, more recent one, Coco, has a similar premise, where a young boy loves playing music, but due to grandma having a passionate hatred for it, it was heavily stigmatized in his family. So he can't share his love or passion for the music that's actively in his blood since his great great grandfather was a famous musician. You could say all three of these films, Frozen, The Hunchback of Notre Dame, or Coco, can be a reference to, at least in this modern day, autism, ADHD, or any number of hidden disorders. In fact, The Hunchback of Notre Dame can be all manner of open, obvious disorders, such as disfigurement, such as physical disabilities, or slurred speech. Being able to be who you are is very important, and again helps you to open up, to allow yourself to understand God. I know there are a good number of scriptures. I can't remember off the top of my head. I'll leave a link in the description to my video on transgenderism, where coming out, so you are, is very important and shows you, and actually this Bible has passages on that. Like I said, I'll leave a link in the description, or maybe in the card if I remember. I don't remember which way it goes. Doesn't it say, "Thou shalt not bear false witness"? Basically, don't lie. Two people you can never lie to are God and yourself. Greg uses a passage from Genesis to show that we shouldn't consider ourselves above God, because the serpent says, if you know the knowledge of good and evil, you shall be like God. Not necessarily. In fact, later on, Adam and Eve knew that they were sinful because they had disobeyed God, and he could see them for who they were, as sinful beings, so they hid from him. But God knew full well where they were. Even though he knew about that, he still asked them if they had eaten of the tree of knowledge of good and evil. Only for Adam to firstly pass the blame on to Eve, and Eve then on to the serpent. Essentially, hiding themselves and then having to cover up themselves because they are sinful. It's important to note that Elsa did something similar. She was clad in the clothes she was forced to wear as part of her status: a purple cloak, long gloves, a crown. She had her hair all tied up in a ridiculously tight bun. I have my hair down practically all the time. So how restricting those sort of things can be. But all that was part of her status thought, so that she was meant to be queen and so forth. But that wasn't her. She shed all those when she ran off to the mountains, and made her own clothes to show her new freedom, using her own powers. Clothing herself in her own power. Essentially making the internal external. Again, letting the coldness out. Does Greg finish there? Does that sum it up? No. He further goes on to the second movie, which I have less understanding of, and so can't defend as well. However, he does go into more about the concept of witchcraft and the study of magic. Now, being of the Harry Potter generation and an avid fan of the book's right here, in fact, I've been interested in magic for years. Even writing a story involving lots of magic. In fact, so much magic in the world that it's no longer seen as a mystical power possessed by only a few. It is in fact mundane. Well, about as mundane to them as the smartphone is to us. It's ubiquitous with modern technology, in this case, their civilization. Does this make me doubt my Christianity, since magic is seen as an abomination to the Lord? Again, context is needed. Yes, passages in the Bible do condemn witchcraft, particularly Deuteronomy chapter 18, verses 9 to 13. It does indeed denounce witchcraft and the occult dealings as abominations. It's worthwhile noting, however, that earlier in the same book, in chapter 12, verse 31, it says, "You must not worship the Lord your God in this way, because they practice for their gods every abomination which God hates. They even burn their sons and daughters in fire as sacrifices to their gods." This is a time where the majority of magical rituals and spells involve the letting of blood, sacrifices, or even the giving of life as such sacrifices. Passing through the fire generally refers to Molech, the bull-headed god who has humans sacrificed to him on quite a few occasions. In my book, Christianity does exist, but Christ isn't seen as just any old magician. No, he's known for his compassion, which is what I had to look for in the Bible. Look for the Bible to see why people would follow him. Would Christianity actually exist in the world? And it would because of Christ's compassion. Not just because of magicians, not just because he can make water into wine, he can make bread go many ways, he can walk on water, he can control storms. Not that. It's compassion. Because most of the other magicians around him at the time, or at least those that profess to be magicians, those who actually use magic for greater deeds, were generally wicked with it and used it for attack. He was clearly very powerful, but he used it for the good of others. So personally, I don't think magic is inherently evil. In fact, many stories about magic, it's the people who were persecuted because of their powers, because of something that is them, that often become evil to gain revenge. There is a generalization, and there's no definitive reason why people turn to evil deeds. Oppression, persecution, and vilification are all factors that can lead people down a dark road. And that's not just in magical fiction, that can happen across the board. And especially in real life as well. This is why we need to pay attention to it, because why are we forcing people away when we should be allowing them in to find the light? Interestingly enough, the old Celtic Christian movement, which still has link with the old Druidic and Wiccan cults, advocate for a more nature-based style worship, encouraging us to be more aware of the environment. Yes, that involves associating with nature spirits of some sorts, but it's worthwhile noting that primitive cultures like the Native Americans, the Australian Aboriginals, and even the Maori of New Zealand lived in relative harmony with the land. It was the coming of the white man and his new ways of doing things, even bringing Christianity to the shores of their lands, that broke those nature based cultures, resulting in whole herds of bison just skinned and left rotting on the plains of America. Burnings of the great forests of Tasmania, of Australia, and even New Zealand for the most part, and losing touch with the lands that might be our only home. All this because Greg thinks, all things not linked to God, like nature spirits, like pagan gods, and for some reason aliens, are all demons sent by Satan to tempt us away from the path of God. Interestingly enough, his video on 4 ways Christians let Satan into their lives only really mentions sins and the occult. However, when it comes to things of occult learnings, such as paganism, Wicca, and spiritualism, the more modern versions are based in Christian morals as laid down in the Ten Commandments. And it's worthwhile noting, as told to me by some good friends of mine who refer to themselves as culturally pagan, in later Wiccan traditions, they called on not only Mother Earth to fuel their spells, but Father God. Their prayers were not into the land, but to the heavens. But there's one thing that we need to remember, one thing to be very careful of when it comes to deciding who is good and who is evil. Because how do you know the difference between spiritualists and prophets of the Holy Spirit? Some people might say, oh, you just know there's something good in them. Not necessarily. I had a prophetess make a prophecy about me that, in plain terms, is very unlikely to come true. Interpretation can be seen as true in some regards. However, I don't hold store by any of those people, and I don't think I ever will. But I never contradict them, since I know that some people may find it hard to find solace anywhere else. Greg mentions ghosts as well, and I accept there's more in this world than can be fully understand, and that can apply to God and therefore the afterlife. But personally, I've never seen a ghost and don't allow demons into my philosophy. Don't allow them room. But I can't deny there are some events that can't fully be understood without acknowledging their existence, be it as demons from the other place or aliens from another world. With all this fear of Satan and his demons, I wondered if Greg's views allowed for the environment, since all those nature spirits could be telling him to look up at the planet. Naturally, I caught sight of a video about climate change that he did, with Greta Thunberg as the thumbnail. So, I looked at it and was pleasantly surprised at first to see he seemed to be taking this matter seriously, even mentioning biblical verses that show the end times are linked to climate change and global warming, which isn't too far off from what I believe as well. And then he said that all the efforts of mankind to fix the environment just isn't going to work. I thought, why? How does this make sense? What's he getting at here? And then guess what? He said it's because of the sins of man And all that we've done, including legalising drugs, homosexuality, and so forth, and all my respect that I built up for him in that moment vanished. I faced plenty of comments saying that sins of man are resulting in the change in the environment. So that is why we are going to die in sin. Denying anything to do with the environment to focus on other matters is very much putting God second rather than first. Because we're not caring for the world He made for us. And so letting it be destroyed by our inactivity. The best analogy I can think of is disciplining your daughter for reading Harry Potter or, heaven forbid, watching Frozen, ignoring the fact that this has further distracted her from cooking dinner, which has currently set fire to the kitchen and is slowly burning the house down. Just because you focus far more on what they're watching, who they're talking to, even what their relationship is going to be like, you're ignoring the fact the world is burning. Yes, people across the internet have pointed out the fires in Australia did happen soon after the same-sex marriage legalisation was passed in court. But this is one of many fires that have occurred in Australia's history. It's a fire-prone country. There's no denying that these fires were more severe. But this is one country with an ever-increasing problem that is as much a problem to us because we're causing it by ignoring the environment. Trying to do the same sinful argument of how the world's falling apart and applying it to the whole world just falls apart quite quickly when one actually goes looking. I did an extensive project, and I mean extensive. It took me a few weeks before I eventually lost interest and move on to other videos, or actually start recreating some. But the best examples of countries that seem sinful and yet are still around are Iceland and the Netherlands. Both have legalised same-sex marriage. The Netherlands are well famous for the legalisation of recreational drugs, and Iceland still has a notable population who practice the traditional Aesir Norse religion. In short, they are pagans. How is this relevant? How does this disprove God's hatred? Well, nearly everyone knows that the Netherlands are below sea level and have been since they were made. In fact, the whole point of the Netherlands being there, for possibly why they called the Netherlands in the first place, was because they drained the seas to make the Netherlands, the hinterlands, and all that. Bear in mind, they are one of the first countries, in fact, the Netherlands are the first country to have legalised same-sex marriage and drugs, and that was over 20 years ago. It could have experienced any number of technical disasters that could have drowned the whole nation in less than an afternoon. It's not out of God's ballpark. He did, after all, drown the entire Earth in about 40 days. Iceland? How does that work? Iceland is an active volcano. No other lie, it's on the mid-Atlantic ridge. One of those active spots on Earth. Has more hot springs, and in fact one of its main volcanoes was the glacier called that or not? Around the volcano Eyjafjallajökull caused all manner of trouble for airlines because it blew up. A glacier got liquidized and hence sprayed glass into the atmosphere. But despite having same-sex marriage for 11 years and clearly had a pagan remnant lasting from the Dark Ages. The country, the nation itself, is still on the map, and no one's been removed. In short, both these nations could have been removed from the face of the earth without anyone being the wiser. I'm just thinking, yeah, just happens. Happens when you build on a volcano. Happens when you dig down below sea level. Yet they still exist and are leading the way to help the world become more open and loving. Saying that our attempts to combat climate change are just going to fail, and so we're going to turn to the Catholic Church, pray on a Sunday, and make it worse, is once more assuming. How prophets see the future is something that can change from individual to individual, and I heard that from the mouth of an actual prophet, or she claimed to be an actual prophet. If we take the words literally, without accounting for error or personal bias, we can't hope to understand the will of God. We're going to struggle. However, if we allow for error, if we allow for that, we can get a far better understanding of what God is telling us. I have a personal example. I can't confirm it yet, but I'm willing to say it here until proven otherwise. So, I've said it before, you're going to hear it again. I was once told I would have an Asian wife by a prophetess. You may think, can I have an Asian wife, am I? For context, we were at a Vietnamese restaurant with a group of people from the local Hillsong campus, and I was the only Caucasian person in that group. I couldn't see how many other people in that restaurant, but I was pretty sure I was the only Caucasian person at that table, including the prophets. My girlfriend at the time, who wasn't there with me, she was in Britain, was as white British as humanly possible, and I was on the last leg of my journey, planning on heading back to her soon enough. On blunt expectation, it's just not going to happen. Even though I do have a close friend who is from China. Strange enough, the prophets seemed determined to hook me up with one of the girls in that Hillsong group. I didn't know her and wasn't particularly interested. However, is there a way she could have meant something else? Could she have sensed that I would marry someone who has a home in the East? That opens the door to a whole array of possibilities. Yes, it's a technique used by psychics and mediums and all those charlatans to fish around and see if they can get some interesting tidbits and hence prey on that. It isn't quite so impressive when trying to avoid appearing like a charlatan, but I never ask such questions, narrow it down. And I personally try not to give any signs, and it means that if anyone try rejecting it entirely. I do plan on doing a video at some point on how to avoid being scammed in such a way. Until then, let us wrap up the video. It's getting too long already. Ultimately, the obsession with prophecies and demons makes Greg seem scared to live in a world that God has given us now. And so he's sounding extremely defeatist. It is written, yes, but just because it's written doesn't mean we can't try. True, even if we go carbon neutral overnight, on greenhouse gases into the atmosphere, and actually rebuild the rainforests, it won't instantly stop climate change. The Earth we've damaged has way too much inertia for that to happen. Some of our goals for the preservation of the climate are nearly impossible to achieve. For example, some speculate turn the Sahara Desert into a solar farm. But if achievable, that alone could change the climate, in fact, reverse climate change. Whilst there's no denying our sins, using a broad definition of sin, how triggered this change in the world is not in the way that Greg thinks. Just because it was predicted doesn't mean it's going to happen exactly the way one expects. Prophets are often wrong. We need to work on ourselves. There's no denying that, but also our effect on others, the planet. I'm not a big fan of Greta Thunberg, but she's right about one thing. We may not have much time left. So let us use it wisely. Focus not just on ourselves, but on the people around us. How we can use them to save this world, which might be our only planet. Only home. So remember that, my friends. God be with you.